Greetings, fam, and welcome to Love Inspiry, the podcast. Why do people think being toxic is cute? What exactly are toxic relationships? And how can I refrain from being toxic positive? We are talking everything toxic but helpful today. I'm your host, Angie, the teen wife that turned my struggles into strength, marital woes into wins, and made the mistakes so you don't have to. I've conquered the mission on how to build a successful relationship. So stick around with me and let's talk love. Hey guys, what's up? And welcome to Love Inspiry Podcast, episode 52. We are talking about toxic relationships, more specifically, the key term toxic positivity. This particular podcast came about because I saw a meme talking about, or a question that was asked, posing a question to people about why do people think being in a toxic relationship is cute? What about toxic relationships do people like? And so we're talking about everything toxic, and we're going to talk about toxic positivity, the other side of toxicity that people are not discussing and that people don't understand. So some of us truly don't know that we are toxic, and we really are. And I think about when I was a young wife, when I was a young woman, I was extremely toxic. I always had like an aggressive tone. I was a bit abrasive, and I could turn pretty much anything into an argument. And I don't want to say like I was the worst person in the world, but for me, I know that I had some toxic behaviors, and accountability can make me admit that. Accountability can make me understand that I was a bit toxic and not even realizing that I was toxic. And if you follow me at Love Inspiry Podcast on social media platforms, I talked about in a reel what is toxic behavior. So sometimes we see toxic behavior as starting arguments to get a response from our partner, right? We've all been there before where, they kind of weren't giving us the attention that we needed, or whatever the case may be. And so we started this argument just to get a response out of them. We know women that have acted like they were about to leave a relationship when they really weren't, just to get attention from their partner. Toxic behavior can also consist of gaslighting, manipulation, control, narcissism. All those fall under toxicity. A toxic relationship can consist of jealousy, right? So if you have somebody constantly jealous of your success, that's toxic. If you have somebody jealous of you talking to other men or women, that's toxic relationship. Disrespect is toxic. Consistent habitual cheating is toxic. Lying all the time is toxic. These things we know are toxic relationships. But on the flip side, we have other things to it that are toxic that we don't really know is toxic in what's happening in our relationship. And that is when we stop expressing ourselves, right? You can't grow in your relationship without expressing yourself to your significant other. When you are walking on eggshells around this person, ultimately what this does is build resentment in a relationship. So now you will become argumentative because you're full of resentment and frustration. And overall, being too positive is toxic in your relationship. Later down in the show, we're going to talk about toxic positivity and what I mean by that particular one, because I know you're probably like, what is that about? We're going to talk about it all in this podcast today, and I wanted to share some valuable information when it comes to toxic positivity and how we all have dabbled in a little bit of toxic positivity. But why do people think toxic is cute? Why do people stay in toxic relationships? And the truth boils down to one simple thing, and it's relationships are not studied anymore. And so because we aren't studying our partner, because we aren't studying who we are with, we don't know how to treat them. We don't know how to communicate with them. We don't know how to acknowledge their feelings. Ultimately, this means that we lack emotional intelligence in our relationship. And so because we have stopped studying relationships, because we have stopped studying the person that we're getting into a relationship with, we don't know how because relationships are so complex, right? Because they can be extremely difficult to navigate in some scenarios and situations. When we stop studying them, when we stop studying our partner, this is where we pick up toxic behavior and toxic traits. This is where, if we're not learning anything new, if we're not learning anything valuable, this is where we continue those bad behaviors that we were continuing, or we're not growing in ways that we should grow in the relationship. Also, number one, we're not studying relationships. Number two, environment is huge. Growing up in a single parent household, growing up where you were in a 2-parent household that was unhealthy. You guys hear me talk about that a lot. It's not just about growing up in a single parent household, but if you're in a 2-parent household and it's unhealthy, it's just as bad as just a regular bad household. But where you saw pettiness, right? Where you saw arguments, all this plays a role in how you're going to portray yourself in a relationship. And all of this can contribute to your toxicity. So your environment is key. If you are one that doesn't know why you attract toxicity or why you're toxic yourself, why you kind of embrace it, kind of look at your environment. Look at if you're studying relationships. Also, some of us just like attention no matter whether it's negative or positive. Some attention to people is better than no attention. And that's just, self-explanatory of people just, they want attention and they don't care how they get it. Also, some people have no hope for good relationships, so they put no effort into creating their relationship to be non-toxic. When you have no hope for relationships, or when you think that all men are dogs or all women want one thing and this, that, and the third, you automatically set yourself up for a toxic relationship because you're not going into the relationship with the mindset, okay, this relationship will work. This relationship can work. It's just toxic. You're setting yourself up to be prepared for that, or to be, and it's okay to be prepared for anything, but when you go in with the mindset of toxicity, that's all you're going to be able to point out is the toxicity. I feel so sorry sometimes for people that have no hope for a good relationship, because I know, like I said in previous podcasts, that the dating scene out here, right, it's not that friendly for single women. It's not that friendly for, men that have a good head on their shoulders, or men that are going places, and men that really want to settle down with you. So the dating pool is like scarce. It's not really good. And so this leaves people hopeless for that good relationship. And like I said, it makes them kind of their attitude toxic when they get into a new relationship because they have no expectation. And I always feel like I said, to sum up, if you have no good expectations, it's kind of like you're walking into toxicity, and like I said, you're setting yourself up for a toxic relationship. So I talked earlier about how being overall positive is a toxic situation. I stand firm in that. I truly believe that. And I wanted to talk about the definition of toxic positivity. You can look this up, but I'm going to sum this up in my own words. A lot of us are toxic positive. And I wanted to talk about this in this podcast because I wanted to bring awareness to the term in helping people understand what it truly means when you're being toxic positive, and how sometimes being so positive can impact your relationship in a negative way. So when we're talking about toxic positivity, we're talking about someone who dismisses emotions, or they dismiss emotions that will result in like a challenging and uncomfortable conversation or feeling. So anybody that doesn't know how to, or doesn't acknowledge negative feelings that you may feel. Most people avoid negative emotions because of the fact when you have these negative emotions and you bring them to the forefront, suddenly they're in your face, and now you have to deal with them. And a lot of people can't find a way to deal with their negative emotions and how to handle them and how to manage them, let alone somebody else's. And it's not always the easiest thing to do. So people that face traumas like sexual abuse, facing that, and if you have to face your accuser, it's not always an easy thing. So, an example of being toxic positive, and you're gonna completely go crazy because I'm pretty sure you said some of these things to somebody. I know I have. And it's a person that's overly positive, right? So it's somebody that says something like focus on the good, or somebody that says others have it worse than you, or why are you being so negative, or anything that pacifies a true feeling or emotion that you're going through and that you're experiencing is toxic positive. There's a way to deal with emotions and handle emotions without pacifying it off as, oh, somebody else has it worse than you. And the truth is, sometimes it is not even that the person is trying to be dismissive of your feelings and your emotions and things that you're going through. They just may not know how to handle them. They just may not know how to manage and deal with you. And this is why I always say to people that it's very, very important that you study your partner, that you know who your partner is, why they act the way they do, why they think the way that they think. Everything about your partner is significant to know because it's going to help you communicate better, ultimately helping you navigate your relationship. So I wanted to use Black men as an example with this. A lot of people know Black men in the community. Them having feelings is non-existent, right? And it's because of how they grew up. I have a sister who doesn't like for my nephew to cry. I'm not going to say his age or anything because I don't want to, start no family feud. But I do have a sister that doesn't like when my nephew cries. And it's teaching him how to not deal with his emotions. And in turn, what could possibly happen, not say this will happen to him, but what could possibly happen to him is he's not going to know how to handle his future wife's emotions, his future girlfriend's emotions, because he's not being taught how to deal with his emotions as a young boy. And that kind of scares me for what he's going to grow up into to be a man. Of course, I'm not saying that people that grow up in bad situations or negative situations, or people, and not to down my sister, but parents that don't know how to handle that kind of thing, that they can't flip it around and make a change. I'm not saying that at all. I'm pretty sure and I'm praying that he will be able to learn how to navigate his emotions. But across the board, Black men are taught, okay, suck it up, just get over it, you'll be fine. And this doesn't help them down the road when it comes time to be in a relationship with a woman, because they don't know how to navigate through her emotions because they can't navigate through their emotions. When you haven't dealt with your own trauma, how can you help someone else through their trauma? Even the Bible talks about this. One of my favorite scriptures of all time: when you have been converted, strengthen your brother. When you have been converted, meaning you can't strengthen anybody or anything until you have experience. And the same thing applies here. You can't help someone, your partner, through their situation until you have gotten through your own situation. You can't help your partner through their triggers until you have identified your own triggers and found a more excellent way to get them out of whatever it is that they are going through. So it's important that we tackle our own emotions, in understanding our own emotions before we get into a relationship, so we know how to navigate in a relationship. Because feelings, emotions, they're going to come up in your relationship. They are prone to be a conversation in your relationship. And, happiness, all that stuff, sadness, anger, all of that stuff. We have to remember that negative emotions and feelings are a part of the human experience, guys. Anger, like I just mentioned, anger is a negative thing. The Bible says, be angry, but sin not. So it's okay for you to be angry as long as you don't go out and kill somebody or yoke somebody up or whatever the case may be. But we are going to experience these negative emotions, and we have to be equipped to handle them in our relationship effectively. Otherwise, we're just going to be some messed up people trying to figure it out. So how do we handle our negative emotions without draining our partner, without draining ourselves? And I have a YouTube series coming out very, very soon. I'm getting the logistics still together and how I want to break down the episodes, but it's about, and in it, I'm not going to say exactly what it's about yet, but kind of similar to this, but in it, I break down feelings versus emotions. So I talk about that. So I'm not going to go into depth on this podcast because, like I said, it'll be a whole nother series. However, how do we do this? And the first thing really is to understand your triggers. A lot of negative feelings or emotions stem from something happening. Something has happened in that moment to trigger us to feel anger, to be sad, to be happy, to be whatever the case may be. For example, for me, people know my situation with my husband and I sharing sandwiches off the dollar menu, with us sleeping in motels and all that stuff. And I can smile through it now because God delivered us out of that situation. But it was a tough situation for us. So for me, when I see homeless people, and when I say homeless people, I'm not talking about the panhandlers with the signs on the highway. I'm talking about, not saying that some of them aren't homeless, but we know some of them are not either. But I'm talking about pitched up tents on the side of the highway and somebody sleeping in it. That's a trigger for me. Because we know if you're pitched up on the side of the highway and you're sleeping in a tent, you're clearly really homeless. You're not just out here trying to collect a check or some money. You're homeless. So that's a trigger for me. It puts me in a very despondent place. So I may get an urge to kind of talk to my husband about a financial matter or budget, or we need to be doing this or we need to be doing that. But because that's my trigger, it's not his, right? I have to choose in that moment how I'm going to show up to not drain him. And also, if I end up draining him, I'm going to drain myself because he's going to get mad, and then I'm going to get mad because he's mad. It's a trickle effect. So this doesn't just help your partner, but it helps you also. So I have to choose what space or how I'm going to show up because he's not in the same space, right? The triggers are different. And that's the number one thing we need to realize with relationships in general. Your triggers are not your partner's triggers, and that's okay. But you still need to manage them. You still need to know how to effectively deal with them. Because for a while, when I talked about financial matters, I was not showing up as someone that wanted to have an adult conversation. I was showing up as somebody who was scared. And when you are scared, you react a certain way, right? When you get scared, you react as I was reacting as a scared little girl. Like, I don't want to get back in this space. Talking about financial matters, setting budgets, doing all these things makes me anxious because we were this close to pitching a tent somewhere because we just were that broke. But you have to understand your triggers. You have to be able to identify your triggers and what is really, really the root cause of why you are in that moment feeling this way. Once you do that, then you can ask for what you need, right? You can talk to your partner and communicate these things to them. You can share moments of weakness with them. And I said this to somebody last week. A lot of our arguments tend to happen because we haven't discussed this. You can't argue or make life-altering decisions over something you haven't discussed as a couple. So when you have these triggers, right, when you have these moments of weakness, when you have these emotions that are coming up and you need to let something out, it's best to ask for what you need, communicate to your partner, and share in that moment exactly what it is that they can do to help you. How can they shift your experience into a more not toxic positive, but more reassurance, right? So ask for what you need. Asking for what you need, number one, it's not going to drain your partner. It's when you let stuff fester and you start arguments, that's what's going to drain them. And that's what's, like I said earlier, what's going to ultimately drain you. So when you expect them to know something you didn't share with them, that's draining. When you expect them to react in a way that, and this is, again, how you know your partner. Because sometimes, for me, sometimes I want my husband to like, buck up. But I know he's not in that space no more. Not saying that he's a punk, not at all. Not at all, trust me. But he's not in a space of, he knows his limitations. He knows that when he goes there, he's going there. And so maturity helped him to calm down and pull back and say, okay, you know what? I don't react like a woman reacts. I'm not going to react how I reacted when I was 19, 20 years old because I'm not in that space anymore. So when you don't discuss things, this is what's going to make your partner drained and ultimately make you drained. It's about reassurance of the negative experience. I think it's important for us to understand that you can give someone encouragement without being toxic positive or passive in your approach. And we talked about this, like, let's say you're going through something and somebody says, if you're talking about a couple, or you want something that another couple has, and oh, they're going through they have issues too, or whatever, that's kind of a toxic positive trait of saying that that somebody has it worse. That's one of the phrases of toxic positivity. Toxic positivity is saying that somebody has it worse off than you, as opposed to reassuring this person, reassuring their experience of, okay, you know what? They may have this, we may not be in this space now, but if we keep doing X, Y, and Z, we can get there. It's about giving good and valuable feedback, right? So if you want to reassure your partner in their negative experience, you have to be able to give good and valuable feedback. And it starts with, assessing the situation. You may not know what to say in that moment, and it's okay to not know what to say in that moment, and we have to respect that. But come back with good and valuable feedback of what this person can do to make the relationship better. Watch your words and your body language when you're communicating with your significant other to overcome toxic positivity, right? So sometimes it's not our words that comes off passive, or like we're trying to pacify, like, oh, you're just being negative, or oh, people have it worse than you, or stop acting so dramatic, and this, that, and the third. It can come across in our body, like if we sit back, or we're kind of like have our hand on our head, or we're rolling our eyes, or we're not engaged, we're in our cell phones. All of these things that we do, and I see people do it all the time in relationships. I've done it. Heck, shoot, let's call a spade a spade. I've done all these things. That's why I'm trying to help people understand how these things can impact your relationship. So you have to watch your words. You have to watch your body language when you're communicating with your significant other. You have to be able to give good and valuable feedback so they know, okay, in you, they have a space of surety. They have a space of safety and security. All people want to do, men and women, is feel safe and secure in their relationship, whether that's expressing feelings, whether that's communicating about what happened in their day, whether it's expressing something joyous that they want to do, if they want to go bungee jumping. All people want to do is feel safe in this space. If they want to get vulnerable, all people want to do is feel safe in this space. And when you pacify some of their negative emotions that they're feeling and make them feel like they're wrong for feeling these things, automatically you create a space of insecurity for them. You create a space of them feeling guilt for even feeling the way that they feel, and it doesn't help the relationship. It makes the relationship an unsafe space for them. So we have to watch our words. Toxic positivity, continuously doing it, is going to negatively impact your relationship. If your partner doesn't feel like they are getting the support they need, it's going to negatively impact your relationship. Like I said, safety and security is the number one thing that we can have in our relationship. And without that, your foundation is already shaky. So let's keep that in mind as we are saying and watching terms and things that we're saying to our partner, and that we are truly, truly engaging in that moment instead of saying those phrases that we think are comforting and that we think are helpful in that moment, but they're really not helpful in that moment. So that's something that I just wanted to share with people and talk about. I always struggle with a part of this as a Christian, just understanding, feelings in this thing of how feelings are so fleeting, right? Because one minute we can be happy, then the next minute we can hear something and it could just tear our nerves up, especially nowadays, right? Because we're always hearing bad news. We're always hearing something that is just either being taken away from women, women's rights, or shootings at schools, or somebody getting shot over too much mayo on their sandwich. It's always bad news, and it's hard to stay happy. It's fleeting, and it's normal. But in Christ, we have a joy. God gives us joy that the world cannot take away. There's a major difference between happiness and joy. Joy is given by God, and nothing in that. When you think about God, right? If I think about something bad right now, my happiness can go away. But immediately when I think about Jesus and all that he's done for me, dying on a cross, and all the miracles that he does in my life to this very day, joy consumes me. Joy consumes me, and ultimately the joy is going to make me happy again. So just remember, when you are feeling these feelings, remember the joy that you have in the Lord and the joy that he gives you and the joy that nobody can take away. Read your Bible, guys. Please read your Bible, because I promise you in that is help with processing emotions and learning how to deal with specific situations that you may be going through in your relationship and in your life in general. So I just wanted to hop on and talk about toxic positivity. I hope I broke this down to you, and I hope I made you guys more aware of how you're showing up in the things that you are saying when your partner is being vulnerable, when it's time for you to take accountability for what you have done in the relationship. Watching your words and watching how you are possibly pacifying the situation as, oh, it's just, another phrase that people say that is kind of toxic positive is good vibes only. Well, the vibes are not always going to be good, right? You can want good energy, right? But sometimes you're going to be around people that have bad energy. So it's just things like that, watching the phrases that we're saying, watching how we support and encourage without coming across as if we're trying to pacify these feelings or guilt shaming somebody into thinking that they shouldn't feel this way because somebody else has it worse or somebody else in their relationship is getting beat up. Well, just because somebody else is getting beat up in their relationship doesn't mean that I shouldn't be able to talk to you about the crappy day that I had, even if it was my lashes fell off in the wind or what, that's something stupid, but it's serious. Like, you should be able to talk to your partner about anything negative, anything that is, any kind of feeling that you have. You should be able to talk to your partner about it without them pacifying it and guilt shaming you for thinking that. Of course, you don't want to come off as, a complainer, but that, hey, I have in my partner, I have somebody that I can talk to about everything, and I know they're going to be there and be with me through it all. So we're ending today's show with a quote: sometimes trying to fix them breaks you. Toxic positivity, toxic relationships we talked about today. Sometimes trying to fix them breaks you. If you're in a relationship with a toxic person, you cannot change them. We talked about this last week, how change ultimately changes you, and it's not for the good, it's for the negative. So if you find yourself in a relationship with a toxic person, understand that it's only going to break you in return. Get out of that relationship. If you can't talk to them and reason with them, right? Because the Bible tells us, come let us reason together. But if you find that you can't reason with them or they're not giving, I posted this on my story this week about how, relationships, if one party wants to make it work and then another party doesn't want to make it work, it's not going to work. You both have to be all in, giving 100% to the relationship to make it work and to put effort. So if you find that that's not happening, then it's time to exit stage left. So, all right, guys. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's podcast. Again, next week we're going to be talking about shallow women and why women, end up leaving materialistic things later on in life for men that can provide other things other than a Birkin bag. All right, guys, I'll see you guys all in the new podcast next Friday. Hope you guys have a blessed, and happy July. Shout out to all my Cancers. Mwah.